Have you ever noticed how in some families, there's always that one person, the one who gets criticized just a little bit more harshly, appreciated way less, and somehow always ends up holding the bag when things go south? Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking something absolutely fascinating called the Scapegoat Paradox. Now, growing up as the family scapegoat, or, the problem child, isn't just a tough childhood. It actually serves as a powerful psychological blueprint that completely rewires how you view your own worth. But as you're going to see, there's a massive paradox at play here. The exact same environment designed to break you down, the chaos that made you question your entire value, it might have inadvertently turned you into the most resilient, perceptive person in the room. Let me speak directly to you for a second. Were you always the one to blame? Were you that kid carrying the weight of all the family's dysfunction, blamed for the spilled milk, the bad moods, the arguments, even when you literally weren't in the room? It's a massive burden to carry, and it creates a very specific kind of psychological conditioning. You start internalizing all that dysfunction around you, basically taking on the job of managing the emotional weather of your entire household. It's exhausting. But as we'll explore, understanding this dynamic is the absolute first step to finally untangling it. Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the learned lens, and look at exactly how we start internalizing all that blame. So when a kid grows up in an environment where they're hit with way more criticism than actual support, their brain has to make sense of that crazy imbalance. And unfortunately, it learns a really dangerous lesson. It essentially says, hey, something must be fundamentally wrong with me. This sparks what psychologists call the lens of replaceability. It's this deeply ingrained, almost physical feeling that if you just disappeared tomorrow, the world would keep right on spinning without a second thought. Nobody would miss you. Nobody would even notice. Because you were taught so early on that your presence was just a burden or an inconvenience, your baseline assumption in literally any group or relationship becomes that you are entirely expendable. You are fundamentally replaceable. And because of that deep fear of being replaced, you end up developing what's known as an insecure attachment style. You essentially learn to survive by just hiding your needs. You don't want to be a burden, right? So you shrink yourself down. You subconsciously start preparing for relationships to end before they've even really started, always waiting for that other shoe to drop. You become someone who is super easy to keep. You're low maintenance, you don't ask for much, you just go with the flow. But the tragic flip side here is that you also become incredibly easy to overlook. When you're constantly silencing your own voice just to keep the peace, people just kind of forget you even have one. Let's take a quick pause here. Be totally honest with me. Have you ever bumped into an inanimate object, like a chair or a table, and instinctively muttered, "Oh, my bad, I'm sorry"? It sounds kind of funny, right? But listen, if you've ever apologized to a piece of furniture because you are just so deeply conditioned to be the one at fault in literally every situation, well, congratulations, you just might be a family scapegoat. It's a wry little symptom of a much bigger conditioning. Your default setting is basically, I am in the wrong and I need to apologize just for taking up space. All right, let's move on to Section 2, the cost of survival and what we call the awareness trap. Surviving a highly critical environment definitely isn't free. All that constant judgment forces the scapegoat into an exhausting, invisible trap of hyper-self-awareness. You're constantly on guard, managing not just your own emotions, but trying to anticipate the emotional reactions of everyone around you. It's like wearing a heavy, invisible backpack every single day. While other people are out there just living, simply existing in the moment and reacting to things as they happen, you are doing something totally different. You're pattern matching. You're scanning the room for mistakes before you even make them. You're picking up on a subtle 1-degree shift in someone's tone of voice or a tiny micro-expression that literally everyone else at the dinner table completely missed. And long after that interaction is over, you're still replaying the conversation in your head, agonizing over whether your tone was slightly off or if you talked too much. But we really have to remember why you do this. Hypervigilance is a survival tool. Think about it. If you can successfully predict an attack, you can brace for it, or maybe even avoid it altogether. You did this to survive the emotional chaos of your childhood. But here's the real tragedy of carrying that tool into adulthood. When you're hyper-focused on anticipating threats, you completely lose the ability to trust. Even when you're drowning, you really struggle to believe that someone is actually going to throw you a life raft. And why would you? In your formative years, nobody did. Let's do another quick check-in here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you absolutely hate asking for help? Go ahead. Think of your number. I'll wait. Actually, scratch that. I bet I already know the answer. It's an 11, isn't it? For sure. Because for this scapegoat, asking for help doesn't feel like building a connection. It feels terrifying. It feels like you're handing someone a loaded weapon, fully expecting them to turn around and use it against you later just to prove that you're weak, needy, or a burden. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how we flip the script. Let's step into section 3, turning damage into power, and looking at your evolutionary advantage. So all those exhausting coping mechanisms we just talked about, the hyper-awareness, the overanalyzing, the constant emotional scanning, guess what? They are actually high-level psychological assets just hiding in plain sight. Take a look at this number, a massive 70%. Research actually indicates that up to 70% of high-impact leaders, the people who actually change the world and steer the ship through massive storms, grew up navigating incredibly complex, difficult emotional terrain as kids. They weren't born with silver spoons in their mouths. They were forged in environments where they had to figure out highly complex human behavior just to survive the day. Let's completely reframe those survival traits into the superpowers they actually are. First up, mental toughness. You don't break easily because, well, you've been weathering storms your entire life. Then there's deep empathy and emotional insight. Because you had to figure out the why behind your family's chaos, you can read a room and understand people's hidden motivations better than almost anyone else. And then we have emotional independence and autonomy. While a lot of folks desperately rely on external validation, you learned early on that support wasn't guaranteed, so you learned to soothe yourself. You became a fixer. When things go terribly wrong in the office or there's a crisis, you don't panic. Why? Because you've been managing chaos since you were 5 years old. You are literally built for this. Which brings us to our final phase, section 4, breaking the loop through a complete identity shift. Having these superpowers is incredible, but to truly harness them, you have to break the cycle of suffering. You gotta stop viewing yourself through the lens of your family's dysfunction. Your past perfectly explains how you got these traits, but it absolutely does not have to define how you use them today. It's time to stop identifying as the problem and step into your brand new identity as the pattern breaker. So how do we actually do that? It's a simple 2-step process, awareness, which then leads to change. And this whole thing is grounded in the actual science of neuroplasticity, your brain's amazing ability to rewire itself. Every single time you pause and catch yourself pattern matching out of fear, that's awareness. And every time you choose to trust your own standards, rather than desperately seeking the approval of people who couldn't love you properly, you are executing change. You are literally physically building a brand new neural pathway in your brain. It's like walking a new path in the snow over and over until it becomes a permanent paved road. If you take only one single thing away from this entire explainer, please let it be this. You were not the scapegoat because you were weak. You were not the target because you were deeply flawed or broken. You were the scapegoat because of your strength. You actually had the capacity to carry the weight that the rest of your family just couldn't handle. Understanding the science of your own brain gives you ultimate control over your future. Once you grasp the hidden mechanics of your past, you can finally, completely reclaim your self-worth. Let's shatter that lens of replaceability once and for all. Always remember, you are not replaceable. You bring a depth of empathy, resilience, and perception to the world that is extremely rare and desperately needed. The very traits you were criticized for are the exact same tools you're going to use to build an extraordinary life. So, as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this one thought. If you stop apologizing to the chair and start owning the immense power you forged in the fire of your past, what could you possibly achieve tomorrow?